Everybody, and welcome to our Wednesday night AJA Zoom series. I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you to the so many of you I can see in the participants right now who joined us over the week at our Melanie Phillips events, both in Brisbane and in Melbourne. They were an incredible success. We had almost 500 people on Sunday night. That was in Melbourne. And we had almost 200 up in Brisbane. So a huge thank you to everybody who joined us for those live events, and especially to the volunteers and our team, both in Brisbane and Melbourne, who worked tirelessly to put on these huge events. We look forward to many more live events, and we thank you for being here tonight for our Wednesday night Zoom series, where we have an incredible speaker lined up for you tonight. Our topic tonight is the solutions to Israel's major challenges, not an easy one, with Amiad Cohen, the founder and CEO of Herut, the Center for Israeli Liberty. Israel faces major diplomatic, political, economic, and military challenges. Amiad presents his vision for resolving these challenges and strengthening Israeli society. Thank you very much for joining us, and please welcome Amiad Cohen.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Danila, for the kind introduction. And thanks for having me here. I'm speaking out of Jerusalem. My name is, as Nina said, Amiad Cohen. I live in a small town north of Jerusalem called Eli. I have 6 kids and a beautiful wife. And I've been running the Herut Center, the Center of Israeli Liberty. It's an Israeli conservative think tank for the past decade. It used to be named Tikva Israel, the Tikva Fund of Israel. But in the past year, we shifted, and today it's the Herut Center. Our goal is to articulate and address solutions for the future of Israel and educate the next generation of leaders in Israel. We have a public policy magazine, we publish books, we have seminars for the future leaders of Israel in high level economics, a legal world, national security, political science, and many others. That's all about Herut. I will speak for the next 20-25 minutes as the host's requests, and then I will appreciate many questions as possible, and I will try to answer as much as possible. A little bit about my background, because I think that gives me a little bit of my comparative advantage here. I've been involved in government and in business in the past 20 years in Israel, from security businesses to real estate, and from local government to advising a lot to national level government officials. And in the past year, I spent over 270 days on the northern border in an infantry unit fighting against Hezbollah. Saying all of that, Israel challenges are significant in many fronts, but as we all know, challenges as we have are often an opportunity to make a significant difference and a significant change in the state of Israel. I will try to articulate what the challenges are and how I think the solutions are an opportunity to take Israel to the next stage. The basic premise is Israel in the past 75 years has thought about itself and has lived in the past 75 years assuming the only identity we have, the fundamental identity, is an existential identity. We are trying to build the house for the Jewish people, fighting against anti-Semitism, some kind of a shelter against the world. The problem, with that premise is that there's no future vision for how the Jewish state needs to look like. What I'm coming to is actually the year and a half before the war. Everyone, I believe, is remembering the protests we had here and the internal separation and conflicts we had here in Israel regarding to a judicial reform. The question was not actually the judicial reform. The question was actually, what is the meaning of a Jewish state? How will we run? What are the values that Jewish state will follow, and how it will look like in the future? These debates, obviously, Hamas followed up, and Hezbollah and Iran and many other countries, the Palestinians in Gaza, looked at these domestic conflicts we had and took an advantage of our weakness in the period of internal conflicts, and took advantage to try to attack us and destroy some of Israel. The southern part, now I'm following a little bit more tactical perspective, the southern part, we need to understand what Hamas tried to achieve and what Hezbollah tried to achieve in the north, and then I'll come back how we solve that from a different perspective about what the Jewish state is. Hamas in the south did not try to take over and destroy the state of Israel. Hamas tried to build itself as a center of gravity from the terror organizations, weakening Israel. They know they cannot destroy Israel. They try to weaken us and enter a negotiation with high-level assets as hostages. Gilad Shalit was one hostage, which took us 5 years to bring him back, and we gave back 1,000 Palestinian terrorists to Hamas for that hostage. They understand our weakness because we care about our population and our citizens, and they took that as advantage. I'm paralyzing that. It's very similar to what the Egyptians wanted to do in 1973. In 1973, the Yom Kippur War, when they attacked us on the south, they did not want to destroy the state of Israel. Their goal in the Badr program, that was their military plan called the Badr plan, they wanted to get a perimeter of 10 kilometers to enter a negotiation with Israel for a peace deal, but it will position us in a position of weakness and a feeling of losing the war of 73 instead of our victory in 67. That's how they see it. They always think in a way of negotiating and positioning themselves in a better place in the negotiation. That's what they tried to do. It worked for them, unfortunately. Our negotiations now against Hamas in Gaza, it doesn't matter how we destroyed the Gaza Strip, and we did destroy the Gaza Strip, they don't care about assets, towns, sewer systems, water, houses, even 50,000 people who were killed in the war. Their religious jihadist Islamist war against the Jews and against the people who oppose the jihadist Islam, they see themselves as victorious now against Israel because they brought us to the negotiation table in a position of weakness because we were willing to pay any price just to get back our hostages. That was the goal of Hamas. On the other hand, Hezbollah is very different. Hezbollah is 10 times stronger, was 10 times stronger, and Hezbollah's operation was literally to take over the entire Galil. I spent, as I said, almost a year up in the northern border, and I was inside Lebanon fighting with Hezbollah operatives and destroying many of their facilities inside inside the towns that are sitting on the perimeter, on the border in Israel from the northern part of it. And the amount of ammunition and weapons that were up there in the north is unbelievable. And they could have taken the entire north of Israel, killing tens of thousands of Israelis on the northern border. And with that supported with their long range missiles and rockets destroying Tel Aviv, it could have been devastating for the state of Israel. Thank God, militarily, we weakened both sides. But, and this is coming back to the premise of what we define our country, we did not want to be victorious. We did not want to destroy Hezbollah. We were unwilling to occupy territory, and we were unwilling to topple down governments and regimes. These are the two fundamental decisive points when you go to war and fight against a real enemy. You need to fight like Americans fought the Second World War, like the Australians fought the Second World War, like the West destroyed Japan and destroyed Germany. We need to look at Hamas in Gaza and at Hezbollah in Lebanon as enemies that are evil as Hezbollah, as the Nazi Germany and Japan in the Second World War. The reason for that is what happened to Israel since the 70s and the 60s. We live in some kind of Groundhog Day. The Groundhog Day is a movie from the 80s, which someone was waking up again and again the same day. Our battles against Hamas and Hezbollah, we're waking again and again with the same cycle. And unfortunately, we will wake up again if we do not destroy Hamas. And this is where Trump comes in. And Hezbollah in the north. If we don't destroy them and force them to surrender, we will never get to a total victory, and we will wake up in 10 to 15 years with a stronger Hezbollah and with another cycle of a military force, whatever, it's not a war, but a military attack in Hamas and Gaza. The real solution here is to end that, and that's, thank God, where Trump comes in. Now, I will address another issue here that we need to understand. Domestically, the debate that I opened with regarding how we conceive the state of Israel. Is it a state that has a moral justification only to defend the Jews as a shelter? What I mean by that is the question is how to use military power. What's your moral justification to use force against either civilians or complicated terror who are playing around as civilians, but they are actually terrorists? And it's a very complicated moral question. If your premise is that you are a state for the Jews, you are a shelter, there's a limited moral justification to achieve a total victory upon your enemies. I understand that it's complicated to understand from outside these inside baseball ideas. But at the end, the Israeli elite, the Israeli old guard, the people who started the state of Israel and established it, with I have a lot of respect for, but their concept was we will build a country on 1 square mile, but it will be our country. And that's it. There's no real concept about how it will look like and what's the moral justification to have a vision of a real strong, prosperous, with a strong Jewish identity of a state. The other alternative, which is the majority of the Jews in Israel, the majority of the Jews in Israel are more traditional in the way they're more Jewish in their perspective with understanding the Jewish identity. They're more conservative in their perspective. They're more pro-free market, pro-individual responsibility. They're much more, as let's say, in a philosophical perspective, much more conservative. Their perspective is we're not only here to save ourselves from being being in exile or being killed by Nazis. We have a destiny, we have a vision, we know what we want to be, and we want to have a prosperous Jewish state that has an identity as a Jewish state, and we're unwilling to even take the risk of having enemies on the north and the south. An example for how these things articulated in Israeli philosophy is there's a very important intellectual on the left in Israel called uh, uh, um, I forgot his name now. I'll remember in a second. Um, he's a very important intellectual in Israel, and he wrote a book called Be'orat Chelet Ha'azah, a political manifest in the 1970s, and he articulated there in a very clear way what's the moral justification for the state of Israel. He said, we are people who are coming from a sinking boat. We fell from a sinking, Amos Oz, that's his name, I apologize. He fell from a sinking boat, and we're in the middle of the sea, and we see a person that is sitting on a log. That person is an Arab, and we are stealing his log, but we are justified to steal part of his log because we are in a threat of dying. So if you understand in the moral perspective, the justification to take over the state of Israel, the land of Israel, and the people who established the state was a very, very limited moral justification. We are thieves. We're taking his log. But, and this is a very important but, we're justified to do that and limit it only in a place where we're secure. So the moral limits are where we're secure. Now, if you understand that scope and how people think about Israeli moral perspective, at the end, that's how they fight wars in a very limited way. And if the threat is not existential, we are limiting ourselves from fighting. So that's why we don't want to totally win Hamas and Gaza. We don't want to totally annihilate Lebanon. We don't want the Palestinians in Judea Samaria. There's no willingness to have a clear total victory on anyone because we want peace and quiet. We don't want victory. The problem with the people who think like that used to be the past. It's not the majority of Israelis think differently, and Trump thinks differently. And this is where we come for today. Trump doesn't understand that perspective. He doesn't get it. He says, you're a country, you have a more justification to live and exist. You need to fight your wars. So win them and win them dramatically. You can't blame anyone else. We're now in a place where Trump is actually forcing Israel to become more Jewish. Trump is forcing us to shift from the perspective of 75 years of trying to save ourselves to become a real strong Jewish state. Thank God we have here Trump forcing us to do it. Now, he's not only forcing Netanyahu, he's forcing the entire elite of Israel. We call it here some kind of the deep state, we call it the bureaucracy, but they're very good people, but they think differently about how to run the state of Israel. Going down to details. To details, We're trying now to solve three different issues. The first issue is obviously how we get out from the Gaza Strip with achieving three goals. One, getting back as much hostages as possible. Two, we want to take down the Hamas regime. Three, we don't want to address Hamas anymore in the future. We thought we can circle the square in many ways, but at the end, it doesn't work out. The only way to do that is by strong military force and forcing the population against its elite, with stopping any humanitarian aid and forcing them, that's war, forcing them to do what we want. But when you fight a war, which you're unwilling to attack locations that you know there's a risk that hostages will die, and the IDF did not attack places where there was a minimal risk for hurting the hostages, that prevented us from fighting a total war in the Gaza Strip. We prevented ourselves from doing a real siege on Gaza and saying, you want food, you want humanitarian aid, these are our demands, bring us back our hostages. We did an imaginative distinction between the population and the Hamas regime, which is not distinct. They're the same thing. They're the same people. They align together totally. So we gave them food, we gave them money because they stole the humanitarian aid, and they took that to fund themselves and hire more soldiers. So actually, Hamas was not that hurt in this war because they hired 10,000 more soldiers and we killed 15,000 of them. So we did not destroy Hamas as we think we did. We did not destroy their perspective in their people because we aided the people. They're eating well. They're enjoying them. They're not enjoying. They destroyed their houses. There are many things we did in Gaza, but at the end, the decisive point of victory is that the population they really think they are victorious, as, by the way, the Egyptians think that in 1973 they won the war, which militarily they did not, diplomatically and definitely by the narrative, they think they did. The third goal is trying to prevent Hamas from rebuilding and from controlling the Gaza Strip, and from us to addressing that challenge in the future. The goal there, and this is, I don't see how that is happening without totally toppling down the Hamas regime, which we're not going there. So we're stuck in the limbo there in the south. On the north, the same thing happening. As we speak today, Iranian people are already rebuilding Hezbollah. And already, we did not destroy Hezbollah. Hezbollah still has 50,000 at least trained operatives that can fight against Israel tomorrow morning. So the Lebanese army, which is a very limited army, came a little bit to the south, but they're not a real game changer in the power. So they have the patience, and they will come back in a year or two. So we will readdress the Hezbollah up in the north. Looking about Iran, Iran is weakened, and I believe again with the Trump administration now, there will be an attempt to topple down the Iranian government in the next year in some ways. And in my perspective, my understanding, the military attack on Iran will come only after weakening dramatically the Iranian government. The third threat we have, and I put Hezbollah and Iran together, the third threat we have is obviously the Palestinian Judea and Samaria. The Palestinian Judea and Samaria support 70 to 80% support Hamas. That means if there's any conversation about a two-state solution, any conversation about two-state solution is actually building a Gaza state with Hamas regime inside the heart of the state of Israel. So what is the solution for that? And the fourth thing that I need to address, and this is overall, is the Israeli economic challenge. We need to discuss that, but that's part of the solution. Again, inside the Israeli debate, the domestic debate we have, the government that is elected by the people disagrees in many, many ways with the leading echelon of the IDF. If you think about the leaders of the IDF, the Mossad, the Shin Bet, they all think in the perspective of, as I said, the shelter, that we are not morally justified to destroy and be victorious against our enemies. So they were pushing from the beginning to a hostage deal. I can tell you as a fact, the IDF tried to stop the war in December for many, many reasons. It's the postmodern way of thinking that they They did not build the IDF well enough. They do not believe in a ground maneuver against our enemies, totally destroying the enemies. There are many militarily perspectives that are postmodern in how they built the IDF. But from December 2023, the IDF did everything in its power not to go full throttle and destroy the enemies. I'm talking about the leading echelon of the IDF, not, let's say, from Brigadier General and down, which are the soldiers in the field. They totally wanted to fight the war, and win it. But unfortunately, the leading echelon, who are part of the old guard in Israel, and that's a generation transition we are going through, which is again part of the solution, which I will address in a couple of minutes. All of this together explains the conflict between the political leadership and the bureaucratic leadership, which I put the leading officials of the security establishment, the Shabak, the Mossad, and the IDF in the same place. Putting on top of that, all of that together, the legal advisors, I can give you some crazy stories about how the legal advisors prevented Israel on October 8th, 9th, and 10th from doing dramatic things who could have changed dramatically the landscape of the war, but they prevent us from international abstract laws who are totally irrelevant for this war and are totally unbased and unjustified in any way. And no country will use these international law ideas, but they forced it on our government. Not taking the blame from the government, which is totally to blame in its incompetence and its ability to restructure and rebuild a leading bureaucracy with great ideas and intellectual and deep understanding of how the people of Israel conceive and think about the state of Israel. They're all together, let's say, very weak in their ability to lead us toward total victory. And that's again where comes Trump. Trump comes with a very simple perspective. There's a war, there are two sides, losers and winners. And Israel should be the winner's side, and a victory, a win in this war needs to be a very clear cut. And he comes with the outside of the box solution called there's no real premise for borders, no real concept of borders. We can play around with that. The second thing, he just did the opposite of the Balfour Declaration for the Palestinians. The Balfour Declaration, 1917, Balfour, the foreign minister of Great Britain, he announced that Israel has a right for a state. It took millions of people that had no country and no vision and no belief that they can get a country. The empire came and said, "This is you are able to get a country. We're the empire. We're giving you the right to have your own country." Now, what happened with Trump? He told the Palestinians, "You will never get a country." The Palestinians, because of October 7th and how they managed the past 10 years and the support of the jihadic Islam, mostly the Muslim Brotherhood, that's the Sunni a branch of the jihadist Islam, you will never get a country. That core idea changes the game totally in our conflict between the Palestinians and us. And now the question is how the leadership of Israel will follow it. Inside Israel, I'm telling you now, we are afraid in some ways that Netanyahu will be now the obstacle against total victory because it's pushing him beyond the limits of his imagination and his understanding of how Israel can be victorious. Yes, he is talking the talk about total victory, but you go down to details, is he walking the walk? And the answer is, in the meantime, not obvious. It's not clear enough. And you can see how Trump is pushing him and Marco Rubio is pushing him towards you do what you need to do to win this war. Now, yes, he needs to struggle against the IDF, he needs to struggle about many other things. But at the end, Netanyahu needs to make very, very hard decisions that go against himself, and he will be totally attacked by the elite, the media, the legal advisory, and the bureaucracy inside the government who will try to prevent him to succeed. It will be a good excuse. But here, this is where Netanyahu can make a clear decision. We had a conference a couple of months ago with Douglas Murray and Ben Shapiro here in Israel. We produced a conference and we minted a coin. And at the bottom end of the coin, here on the bottom end of this coin, it's a coin that we've played around with, a little bit of a coin from history. That's the Judea Capta from 1969 when the Romans destroyed the Second Temple. We wrote on the bottom of it, Pax Israeliana, trying to play around with the concept of Israel as a local empire, imagining a different Israel. And I'm putting this on the table. Israel is in a place that if it makes the right decisions in the next year or two, taking advantage of the Trump administration, but not only, taking the opportunity of the crisis, the internal crisis of Israel, and taking advantage of the clarity that we got from who our enemies are on the north and the south, we will be able to change the path towards success. Now, you think Israel is a successful country, and I agree with that. It is successful, but it is only a very slim success compared to what it can be. Israel GDP per capita today is $55,000 per capita. That is not bad. But I can tell you from inside, it can be much, much, much better. We have the human capital. Today, the Israeli GDP per capita is 60% of the American one. It can be close to 90 to 80%. We have the human capital. We have the ability, but we are a socialist country with a crazy bureaucratic, high taxed, heavily regulated country. And that's a problem that prevents Israel from expanding. Now, if you put together the ability to push forward the real military success, to destroy Hezbollah, which we should have done, taking over the Litani River, and I was there. There was no Hezbollah operatives from approximately July till today between the Israeli border to the Litani River, which is 20 kilometers north of the Israeli border. And it's a very clear river that is a clear border. And tell the Hezbollah operatives, the Hezbollah leadership, this is ours until Hezbollah is destroyed, until Hezbollah is demilitarized. This is us now negotiate. Now come to the table. We decided to take only a perimeter of 2 kilometers. The same thing with the Gaza Strip. We are annexing the northern part of the Gaza Strip unless you return all the hostages and you take down Hamas, and only when these two things happen, we will give you back the corridor. But out of our weakness, we decided to negotiate with Hamas from day one. As I opened, they wanted to start a negotiation, did not want to annihilate Israel. That was their goal, and they succeeded in their goal. The future. I'm optimistic about the future of Israel. I see the next generation of leaders in Israel. I can see this generation of leaders of Israel, including the unbelievable Netanyahu, who did a lot to push Israel forward, and he's a great leader, but he got to his limit in some way. Definitely in building a next generation of leaders, definitely in understanding a different perspective of how to run the state of Israel, which he doesn't have. The next generation of Israel, which will come in 4 to 10 years from now, that generation thinks totally different. It's a generation who understands how to run a country and thinks differently about the moral justification for the state of Israel. And that generation is a generation of victory. Most of us are alums of this war. I was even fighting in the Second Lebanese War and Protective Edge. And since 2000, I've been fighting in Israeli wars. And I can tell you, this generation is different. And if you can imagine a state of Israel that is not only surviving, but is thriving and actually a dominant local empire, call it, or strong country in this region, this hostile region, and on the contrary, not only putting the people not hostile to us, but even they are dependent on us in many ways. We can bring water to the Syrians today. We can be an umbrella of stability in the region. We can even be the tipping point between India and Morocco, connecting the Pacific and the Atlantic. We can imagine a much stronger Israel, which can be also morally leading the world in initiative in high tech and so many fields. But this is something we need to change the premise. We're not people who are trying to survive and fight for our lives and build shelter. We're trying to build a kingdom. This is my opening remarks. I appreciate your patience. Sorry if I was unclear in many things. And I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much. We'll go quickly to our Dr. David Adler, our president, for a quick announcement.
Okay, thank you all. As we do each week, at the end of the event, if you're not yet actively supporting AJA, please go to the website. We need lifters, not leaners, and make sure that you've signed up as a member. If you can, make a donation. Make sure you're following us on the social media for updates, usually multiple times a day. Next week, we're actually beginning some of our election series where we will bring you some candidates, and particularly candidates who don't have as much access to the media as the two major parties. And the first one is the representative of the Jackie Lambie network, the lead Senate candidate for New South Wales, who's an interesting guy with a remarkable military track record, and that colours positively his views of Israel and issues concerning the Jewish community. Very interesting person, well worth listening to. Our guest next week.
Thank you, David. We'll go to our Q&A now. If you have a question, I'll remind you to just use the raise hand button. We might start with Alan, please.
You're mute. Alan, you're on mute.
Alan, you're muted. You need to unmute.
Okay, thanks for that. Amiad, the ceasefire deal that Witkoff forced on Netanyahu before President Trump took office seemed rather strange to me and very un-Trump-like. What did you make of this plan to drip feed the hostages home? And do you think that Trump has actually changed his mind on this original idea?
I'm not confident that Witkoff forced Netanyahu to cut that deal. I think there was a combination of interest there to try to change everything and show some success for Trump in many ways, but it aligned with Netanyahu's willingness to start and solve the problem. That's one thing. The second thing, again, looking at Netanyahu's interest here, if you remember the 3 weeks before the deal was cut, there was an operation of the Gaza Brigade on the northern part of Gaza in Bet Hanun. And in a week, we lost, if I'm not mistaken, 8 soldiers of the Nachal Brigade. The marginal effect of the military operation was not only limited, but sometimes negative. If you think about Clausewitz is a German thinker in military thought, you understand that a military operation needs to gain assets so the diplomatic branch can come and negotiate on these assets, but they're pushing to the same vector. The military operation stopped gaining assets for Netanyahu. It started losing assets because it wasted time towards Trump. It showed us as losers and not trying unsuccessful in winning the war. So Netanyahu stopped it and went to the negotiation table, at least to achieve some assets in the hostage deal. A similar event happened in the Second Lebanese War. If you remember, in 2006, Hezbollah kidnapped 3 Israeli soldiers, and we went to war. Olmert was prime minister, and the Americans told Olmert, "Okay, go to war and win this war." So after a week, they asked Olmert, "What's happening?" He said, "I need another week." So he went to war again. Then another week. "I need another week." And after 40 days, the Americans said, "And we understand you're unable to win the war. Stop it." So the Americans, in many ways, are trying to help us not to fail, not to show enough weakness. Now, I can explain why the IDF was unsuccessful in winning the war in 2006, which is very similar to now, but this is a military perspective that I lecture. But at the end, Netanyahu's, let's say, political agenda was not to lose more on the military aspect, so he shifted towards a diplomatic one, thinking that he can come back when Trump comes back to have a military assess. When he changes, and this is what happened, the chief of staff of the IDF from Herut to Yael Zamir.
Thank you, Amiad. Dana, would you like to unmute, please?
Thank you. Amiad, you're proposing that Israel think big, probably would summarize what you were saying. but they've got the world forces against them. How are you going to cope with the UN and its sub-branches and its so-called legal branches, etc.?
Right. So first of all, international law is a branch of politics, not a branch of law. What I mean by that, it's a balance of power much more than a legal debate. We need to respect a lot of the international institutions in some ways, but we need to be very strong in our standing according, how we approach them. And taking the Trump administration time now is a good opportunity to rebalance that power. We need to think about the Trump administration again in a long strategic way. We can take advantage on the short term and have some local gains. But if we think strategically, I'm terrified about the next Democratic administration who will run the White House in America. Now, there's a 20 to 30 chance that we will be in another war and there will be another Obama or AOC or Biden running the America in 10, 15 years from now. So how do we take advantage of the Trump administration to get there stronger? We wrote a very long piece about that. I'm hoping to publish it in an American public policy article soon. But at the end, that perspective is, let's try to be more independent from America as an ally of America, not as a client of America. That will enable us to fight against the international institutions as allies of America together against them, as not as a client. America, please help us do that. But we need to think about these things in a different way. If we're trying, as I opened, only to survive, we will never think big about our opportunities, and we will always look ourselves as small people compared to these big, important institutions as the UN and its all international institutions.
Thank you. David, please unmute.
Yes.
David, we can hear you.
Good. Now you said, Amiad, that Netanyahu's lagging behind in terms of responding to the opportunistic situation that Trump has established. Now Netanyahu suggested the establishment of a Palestinian state on Saudi territory. Netanyahu even appeared to be joking when he responded to an interview on pro-Netanyahu Channel 14 in Israel, who mistakenly said Saudi state instead of Palestinian state before correcting himself. But isn't this all indicative that Netanyahu is on the same wavelength as Trump?
Again, he's talking the talk some ways, but he's not walking the walk. He's not really making the hard decisions needed to push us there. He has a strong right-wing flank in his government trying to push him there, unsophisticatedly, by the way. In my perspective, they could do a much better job, but they're doing a fair enough job. But at the end, Netanyahu is an old guard, and he believes in a moderate, realistic solution, which the Palestinians are still here, and we do not. He doesn't think big in that way. Again, and unfortunately, if you look at Netanyahu's decisions and not what he says in speeches, it's very different than what you just addressed regarding to the Trump remarks. I hope it will change.
Thank you. Saul, would you like to unmute, please?
Thank you. Very interesting. Now, really, to win the war, you need from the enemy, from Hamas, unconditional surrender, as we had in the Second World War. Unconditional surrender, no nonsense, no negotiation.
Totally
But
agree with you.
to do that, you could do it maybe within 2 weeks, cut off water completely to the territory of Gaza. No water, no food, particularly water. But the problem now, the hostages. What happens there? Are you prepared to sacrifice the hostages?
Yes. What I mean by that is I will do everything in my power not to. I will try to send units, my friends, who will die on the way to save them. But if I will calculate a total victory for the state of Israel and sacrificing a handful of people, I will do that. I myself went to war willing to sacrifice myself. I lost many friends in the past 20 years, including dozens in this war, individuals who are willing to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. I don't want to die. No one wants to die, but we're willing to pay the price because the greater good, the state of Israel, the Jewish history from 3,500 years ago and 3,500 years forward is much bigger than myself. So if I'm willing to die, to lose friends, and if my son was now in the IDF, I would. It's hard, believe me. I know how hard it is, and I don't want that to happen, but I'm willing to do it if necessary. So yes, the answer is if the risk is 10, 15, 20 soldiers died or hostages died, there's no real difference between the two of them. I'm willing to do that for a total victory of the state of Israel and getting Israel to a place of peace for the next 500 years.
Thank you. On, would you like to unmute?
Hello. So I just got an article from the ABC saying that Israeli families says Hamas was using UNRWA's building in Gaza to hide hostages. Now, Trump has demanded the release of all hostages on Saturday, 12 p.m. Will this expose UNRWA's clear involvement with Hamas? And what kind of international pressures can Australia and other countries around the world do?
You muted yourself again. You're muted, Anne.
Sorry. My question is this: when Trump exposes UNRWA's involvement with Hamas after he demands the release of all hostages on Saturday, 12 p.m., because we know UNRWA has been using their buildings to hide Israeli hostages, what kind of pressure does the international community is going to put on UNRWA in order to force complete transparency of their involvement with Hamas?
We need to understand that UNRWA is a branch of the UN. Literally, it's an international institution that is involved deeply with Hamas. That's a fact. The only thing that can really make a difference here is that big countries like Australia and the United States will tell the UN, and I believe it needs to come together with human rights, the UN Committee for Human Rights and many others, saying we will stop funding the entire UN if you do not do A, B, and C, including dismantling UNRWA. Now, there's no alternative for UNRWA because everyone in the population in Gaza, almost everyone in the population of Gaza, support Hamas. They're all jihadist Muslims who believe in what they did and are happy of the massacre and atrocities that happened in October 7th. So will a local Palestinian take care of themselves that is not part of Hamas? It's almost impossible. What is the solution? The solution is, first of all, as Trump offered, transferring them to a different country with a different country taking care of them. That's the best solution. Otherwise, yes, there are many technological solutions. We can verify that not UNRWA people, not Hamas people control the money, because the problem is not only UNRWA facilities, but UNRWA money that gets to Hamas, and they fund everything there. Their war covered by UN and human rights. The third thing is the deepest one here. We need to understand there's no real difference between the civil population and the Hamas leadership. And everyone there is an enemy, and we need to, as the previous question was, Saul, yes, we need to get to a total victory on the population, and they need to have a total surrender in front of Israel at the end of this war.
Thank you. Shoshana, please unmute.
Hi. My brain is exploding from listening to you. You're absolutely brilliant. And my first question is, could you be our next prime minister? That would be wonderful. And my next question is probably unanswerable, but what are we going to do in the short term? I mean, Saturday is not far away. What do you think will happen?
I have no clue what's going to happen. I know that actually I think no one knows. This is chaos. Trump is very chaotic in his approach to negotiations, and I don't think he knows exactly what's going to happen. But we need to be ready for all scenarios. So if I was the prime minister of Israel, which I am not, and you need to be elected, so that's the best way to get there. But now, seriously, I would take a military initiative today, already moving troops around Gaza, threatening, attacking, as we did small attack this morning on someone who was literally flying a drone inside Israel from the Gaza Strip this morning in Israel, show military power that we're willing to use that and we're not withdrawing from the Gaza Strip to take today the Netzarim corridor again. Just enter that in a blitzkrieg, fighting, taking inside, taking back our assets. We need to take the initiative. And again, unfortunately, I don't see Netanyahu doing it. Not because he doesn't understand that, because it's a moral perspective. It's a very realistic, calculated way of thinking that I appreciate, but I think he's wrong in the situation now. And I think we need to take the initiative, take more assets, and then negotiate again on them, or not negotiate, but come and say, this is a total victory. Let's destroy everything now. And we want your full surrender. We saved now, I think, 12, 15 hostages. We might have saved more. I don't know. I will do my best, everything. But this is the position we need to take the initiative back to our hands.
Thank you. Cohen, would you like to unmute, please?
Thank you very much, Amiad, for your talk. I was thinking that the UN has been very quiet on all this in the recent weeks. Is it feasible that Israel or you get the UN to hold a court and put every one of the members of the Hamas and Hezbollah on trial?
I don't think it will happen, and I don't think it's a good thing. I won't think it's going to happen because the UN does not use military power. That means they use other countries to use military power, and I will not risk any Israeli to capture any leader of Hamas or Hezbollah. I will prefer killing them. That's my solution for them. Shorten their life expectancy and their predecessors' life expectancy as short as possible, because that's the only way to deter them. A long trial of 15 months, 2 years, does not deter anyone. With a short-term, it doesn't really, it's not that important today for us to happen, and it will not happen. I prefer them being very deterred for losing everything they can. In military war, again, you look for decisive points at the enemy and you address them. The decisive points in, let's say, terror groups, Muslim jihadist terror groups, are two: their territory and their control on the territory. If they lose both of them, that means they lose territory on the northern part of the Gaza Strip, the southern part of Lebanon, and they lose control on their territory, the entire Gaza Strip. There's no more Hamas leadership. These are the decisive points they're unwilling to lose. And that's where Trump's get it, and the Israeli leadership does not get it. And that will what deter them, not a court in the UN, unfortunately.
Robert, please unmute.
Two questions. First one is the date of release of the hostages. I can understand Friday and Sunday not releasing because the Muslims have got the Friday, the Christians, the Red Cross have got the Sunday. But could it have been done? I know saving a life if it overrides the Shabbos, but why particular that day to intimidate us? That's question one. Question two, hopefully they're released on Shabbos, they're going to be released. But if it's not, do you think it's possible that Trump's going to come in and everything will blow up, including Iran and the Houthis and boom, boom?
The first question, why are they doing it on Shabbat? That was the question. I don't know. I assume, I don't really know. I think there's a religious, obviously, perspective for that, but I don't know as a fact, why are they doing it? The second question is, do I think Trump will come and attack and support us with attacking in Gaza and Iran? No, I do not think America will use military power. There are there's two actually, American presidents, the most conservative American presidents who didn't go to war in the past 50 years. That's Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. I don't think Donald Trump will go to a full-scale war with anyone. He prefers soft power or economic power. Now, I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't want America to fight our wars. This needs to be very clear. Israel has a strong army. Israel has the ability to do almost whatever it wants in the Middle East today. Israel can destroy a lot of Iran. Israel can destroy a lot of Gaza. Its limitations and handcuffs we're putting on ourselves and Biden administration preventing weapons, and this is something we need to address in the long run for us to have a long ability to have a long war. But if he gives us supplies and we buy it, I don't want it as a present. I'm an independent country. I'm a sovereign state. But if I can buy as much weapons as I want because of the weapon deal we had with America, that we buy everything and we don't compete against them with selling weapons. There's a non-compete deal between Israel and America that we buy everything we can from them and the rest we supply ourselves. It will change now. But if we can do everything ourselves, I prefer Israel fighting its war for it by itself and America doing economic sanctions on Iran, on the Houthis, and the Americans using a military blockade on Iranian ships and preventing them from exporting oil now from Iran through Iraq. But I believe that Israeli soldiers can do and will do whatever needs to save the state of Israel. Will America join a war? I doubt it. The American emphasis now is on China. They need to rebuild their army to have significant advantage, mostly maritime advantage, in their navy in front of China in the East and South China Sea. That's Americans' priority. I understand it. I respect it. Let me handle the Middle East, and you take care of the Far East. But let us do it, and we will do it the best way we know.
Thank you. Jeff, please unmute.
Shalom, Amiad. I enjoy your heavy, aggressive attitude to most things, but you've got to, excuse me, you've got to get off this international law business. Do you realize that every man's dog or proverbial quango has got its own rules of international law? Most of international law is ensconced in proportionality and the use of pea shooters only, and effectively besmirch Israel's war effort. So if you care to tell me what international law that you're referring to, there must be at least 20 of them. I would rather think that there are such things as rules of law and be done with it. And otherwise, that's a very minor criticism of your wonderful talk. But really, tell me whose law or international law do you espouse?
Let's put it like that. I agree with every treaty we're signed on. But the treaties do not determine that I have to supply food for my enemy. So I will not massacre children and women and people who are not combatant and not part of the war intentionally, definitely. But I'm not obligated, as I said, to take full responsibility for the civil population in territories that are open to Egypt. I'm not obligated to supply water and electricity as we are doing today to the Gaza Strip. So yes, international, we are till today, by the way, doesn't matter what we did, Netanyahu is still, has an arrest warrant against Netanyahu on nothing that he did by the ICC and ICJ. So first of all, it doesn't matter what the Jews do. The international law will go against us. Second thing, our hands are clean in our approach to real hardcore treaties we were signed on in international law. And I know for a fact, because I was involved in the IDF, on how we target bombs on everywhere in the northern part of what I know, but I'm confident the same thing in the southern part. We are so calculated and so precise on how we send our bombs against very, let's say, questionable population places that it's not we're number one in the world in how we manage it. The number two is so far down in any war in the world history that it's unbelievable that these are the restraints that we put on ourselves. Now, again, I don't have a moral problem here, but legally, there's no question Israel is the top country working by international treaties and so-called international law.
Thank you. We've got a question here in the chat. Who are the promising leaders for after Bibi's era?
So, first of all, very good question. There's a movie from the late 1990s called The Matrix, where Morpheus is going around and looking for Neo, the one. And today in Israel, everyone is Morpheus. Everyone is looking for the next Bibi, like the one. I can tell you honestly, I have no clue who he is. But there's an unbelievable generation of people. I know 50 to 100 of them that are talented, intellectual, smart, articulate, well versed. They know their world, and they're Zionist, capitalist believers. They understand the state of Israel, understand international law. They will need to prove themselves in the ballot. That's how it works. But I know, again, I'm with them in my same think tank. There's some of them in the Knesset, some of them going around. But the question is the ballot. There are dozens of these people that are talented. Again, they need to convince the people first.
Thank you. And for our final question for the evening, can you please tell us, how do we support Herut? How do we follow what you're doing? And how do we communicate and get in touch with the Center for Israeli Liberty?
So first of all, we have a website, which I will share with you, herutcenter.org.il. I will send all the connections. And we'd appreciate first support. Obviously, financial support will be, we will be thankful for that if possible. That's the one thing. But again, the most important support is support for the state of Israel and investing in Israel. We are people who believe in business. We believe in the growth of the state of Israel. The state of Israel needs people who believe in it too, not only spiritually, but also financially investing in the state. The Herut Center, you are obviously invited to come here. My email, I will send to Nila my email here. You have it already, I believe. You're welcome to come here when you come to Israel. You're invited to share with us. We have conferences. I believe in July 24th, we're going to have a conference. It's not locked down with Jordan Peterson here in Israel. 7,500 young conservative Israelis having a big conference here in Jerusalem. We just had 2 months ago, Ben Shapiro and Douglas Murray, as I said, with 3,500 Israelis. We have big conferences, big audiences. This week, next week, we have a conference, a 3-day national security conference, invite-only conference to our friends. 3 days with all the leadership in Israel, Azerbaijan, America, sitting in one place. So we're deep in that. You can register on the website, subscribe to our mailing list, and we would love to share with you everything we have.
Thank you so much. We will send those links out when we send the recording out in our weekly, our newsletter that we send to all our members and everyone who signed up. I would like to say a huge thank you to Amiad Cohen for his words tonight, for his information. It was an incredibly informative evening. And I will remind you that this has been recorded. It will be available on our YouTube channel, as well as replayed on J-Air radio station tomorrow. So please make sure to share that recording with your family and friends, and look out on the YouTube channel and in our email for those links on how you can support, subscribe, and keep in touch. Thank you very much, Amiad Cohen, again. It was an absolute pleasure to host you and have you with us.
Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you for having me.